Okay. Okay. We'll get it sorted out. All right. So I'm just going to introduce myself and the collective. So hi, I'm Tiffany Shaw-Collins. I'm a Métis architect and artist, part of the core membership of pimâtisiwin Contemporary Art Collective. We have 4 other members, which is Haley Finney, who's joining us right now, who's just listening in, though she might ask questions if she wants to. We also have Cheyenne Rain LeGrand. We also have Alberta Rose Williams, and we also have Erin Sutherland. We've had a nice little shift recently where Becca Taylor, who is the lead for this exhibition right now, has taken a lead right now to do some amazing master's work. So we have some people that have come into the gallery now new, which is Chloe Bluebird Mustush, and we also have Emily Taylor helping in the background. And so we want to thank them for this work in this transition. I know the artists have probably felt a bit of a shift, and so thank you so much for being so accommodating as we keep moving forward and doing the best that we can all do. Pimâtisiwin Contemporary Art Center acknowledges the Treaty 6 territory and the Métis Nation of Alberta, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Cree, Métis, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations and continue today. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and the elders who are still with us today, those who have gone before us, and we acknowledge those yet to come. And so this show here is miyo pimâtisiwin, and I was just talking with Becca earlier today a little bit more about the title just to give an understanding. And the way that we understand it is around the description of living a good life and about it being around balance, which is why this exhibition is so fascinating. This exhibition explores Indigenous health and wellness through the investigations of the constellations relationships that create a balanced good life, centered on the pillars of the woven relationships between mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. Each artist brings a personal reflection on their ideologies on Indigenous health sovereignty, gathering inspiration and narratives from within, deep connections to land, art, and making of the responsibilities we share in health and well-being for our families, communities, and nations. So this is a very broad topic, and we're really excited to explore it with the 3 artists that are in the exhibition, which are Carrie Allison, Lisa Bovin, and then also Corvus Roan. And I wondered if Carrie and Lisa, if you're comfortable doing a quick introduction of yourselves about where you are from, your pronouns, and the work that you're sort of doing loosely right now, and just to give us a context of where you're coming from and who you are. So Lisa, would you be comfortable introducing yourself first?
Yes. My name, you said my name. uh, I am a member of the Dene First Nation in Northwest Territories. I was raised in Edmonton. My pronouns are she and her. I am an ethicist and doctoral candidate at University of Toronto, Faculty of Medicine. I guess in terms of my work, because bioethics or clinical medicine is such a huge canon, I would say my expertise lies in informed consent and how the how past colonialism and ongoing colonialism impacts that process in clinical medicine. And what I do is I use images and animal teachings to teach clinicians how to create meaningful relationships with Indigenous patients and populations while realizing what their responsibilities are as settlers in this place that they call Canada.
That's so interesting. I'm sorry, it's just like, thank you for having me. My name is Carrie Allison. My pronouns are she, her. I am a facilitator, visual artist, and new mom. I have a 16-month-old baby. Right now I am in Toronto, the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. But I am based currently in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territories of the Mi'kmaq people. And I've been in Mi'kmaqi since 2010. I grew up on Coast Salish territory of mainly in Tsawwassen First Nations territory. But my family is from in and around like High Prairie area, and I am Cree, Métis, and mixed European descent. My family predominantly comes from Northwest Lesser Slave Lake area. My Métis family names are Boudry, Testowitch, and Soprano, and my Cree family names are Payu and Noskai. My practice is really about looking at my maternal Cree and Métis history and honoring and creating a relationship with the land through visual practice. So a lot of times I use beadwork, but I also work in other mediums as well, such as animation and audio and paper making, like lots of different things. But a lot of the time I work with beads just because I'm in love with the medium, basically. So, yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. That was wonderful as well. And because Corvus is not here just yet, maybe I'll just give them a quick introduction and tell them for when they come in for us. So they are Nakota Sioux and Cree. They're an artist and storyteller based in Amiskwaci, Wasayagan. And their work depicts and focuses on the visual and artistic representation of two-spirit, indigiqueer identities, bodies, and lives. And as an artist, they focus on harm reduction and its relationship to life and work as well. His goal as an artist is to curate artistic works that represent kinship and resilience that these identities intersect on. Through illustrations, painting, and even storytelling, the work deals with themes of identity, belonging, and community, and the hardships experienced through as a two-spirit person. His main focuses are to continue sharing these perspectives, open these conversations, and even exploring the discomfort it takes to grow from it all. So it's nice to have all those different counterpoints around this conversation of health. It's very broad. But this is a topic that we're really fascinated in, and so this is one way that we want to discuss it. But with the works that you are all putting together, it's really brings another layer of care and reciprocity and sovereignty that we're really interested in. And before we go into the questions, I wonder if we can just show the exhibition really briefly. I know Lisa has said that she's not the carrier, but I wonder if there's another person that might be able to just sort of give a nice little pan of the exhibition space so people can sort of be in spirit with us.
Oh, they've abandoned me, so I'm here by myself. So if I fall, okay, I've got a couple of physicians here who are here to support me, so I'll be okay. So don't call 911 if I fall. Right. Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, would you like me to?
If that's okay, I think it would be helpful if that's all right.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be. I think, yeah.
You gave us the warning, so you're not liable in any way or shape or form.
I'm not. Okay, great. Okay, so, all right. So here we go. Did you want to talk about each artist while we're going through the little tour?
I think
red. Okay.
This feels so unfair that you're doing it, but do you have the titles for those pieces, or is that maybe just something?
I actually don't. There's nothing here. I've got Miyo here. Look at this gorgeous man here.
No.
My boyfriend for about 2 weeks, so it's great. So I don't actually have the titles. Oh, hi. Okay, Emily is back. Thank God.
Oh, awesome. That's okay. But this is Corvus's work here that we're looking at right now, but I don't know the title specifically. So.
Okay, great. Okay. A tour of the gallery. So, yeah, there we go. So, there you go. We'll go ahead and thank you.
This is amazing. I love how we're all just trying to shape in. And what's really great about this is Emily showing us the medicine tables. This is our contribution to the exhibition that we have here in the center. And then these are Carrie Allison's work here. These are intricately beaded pieces For people who are joining us live, if you want more information to see the detail of these pieces, please let us know. They're quite beautiful. I think there's so many words to describe this work, but there's a lot in these pieces to be discovered. So please, if people joining us live, if you need more information, please reach out to us at info@pimâtisiwin.ca for more information. And coming around, we also have Lisa's incredible work as well. Oh, thank you so much, Chloe. Chloe Corbus's work is called Going Forward, so thank you for that. And these are Lisa's amazing works. The vibrancy, similar to Lisa's work, is really hard to see on screen, but they are quite impactful. The way that they're collaged, the way that the textures come out, the sense of depth is really quite something to witness. So I hope that people are able to come to our gallery and see the exhibition. These are really incredible. Thank you so much Emily, for bringing us around here. And then there's a video. Yeah, there's this video here. And can someone tell me a little bit more about the video? Because I think that this is something that was new to me for the video.
Lisa, can you talk a little bit about the video?
Oh, yes. So the video is related to my work on the Ontario bioethics table, developing COVID-19 triage protocols. And it's a quote from my grandfather, who was a treaty negotiator and a translator. And those are his words. And he talks about how everything is going to hell, and that these negotiations are falling flat. And it was really impactful for me to read that in the book, As Long as This Land Shall Last, because here I was in a situation where I was in an impossible situation to kind of find a way to get equitable health care to Indigenous people and populations, and nothing had changed. So it's and it's interesting too, because I'm an adoptee. I was one of those who was taken away, and still doing this work, right? Growing up away from my culture, away from my nation, I'm doing the same work as my great-grandfather, and nothing has changed. So it was quite a powerful experience. The layers of the collage are like caribou bone, rock, kind of like a plasticky, iridescent paper and glitter. And the meaning behind the video, the sound of the drops, is reflecting the precious resource we have as water. As humans, right? We're born from water. When we die, the water leaves our body. And I was thinking about resources and resource extraction, because soon we will be reduced to a drop of water. So it's very, very dark. I should be more optimistic working in healthcare, but it's tiring.
I mean, can you be optimistic working in healthcare? That's a really tricky thing.
Oh my God, no. And it's really hard. And it's trying to engage people with their compassion. And that's why I use art to bring those conversations in. And that's why I started using images. So as an ethicist, as a PhD candidate, you realize that you read thousands and thousands of articles and nothing stays with you, but an image occupies a different part of your brain. And I think also it's very triggering, right, to realize, for settler communities to realize that they can't live in this place that settlers call Canada without the destruction of my family and of my ancestors. There is no way that Canada can exist without residential school, without the incarceration of Indigenous people, without the separation from land and resources, without the Indian hospitals, without the lies, it's just cannot. When you live in Canada, you are living on the land that has been destroyed. And I think that's really where I lose audiences, because people want to talk about, like, why can't you get over it? And if I hear about that potato famine one more time, right? Like, and I feel really bad. I'm also have Irish ancestry in me as well, right? But there's a time and a place. And if we are really seeking to mend relationships with reconciliation, or through the words of my great-grandfather, then we really have to be truthful. And in terms of reconciling, it's like, how do you heal from colonial violence that's ongoing, right? So I should be more optimistic. I recognize that I'm a person who lives in privilege because I have access to white education. So, it's a fine line. So I'm just doing the best that I can. So I apologize if that's, if I seem negative. This is my day-to-day life.
I think you should never apologize, Lisa. You're quite amazing, and you have no apologies necessary card here in this session right now. So thank you so much for bringing that information, and people need to understand the difficulty in order to move forward. So thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the images that you have and what you call them and how you came to those arrangements? Because that you have quite a breadth of work. And so in talking with Becca about how this work was selected, all of your work focuses around the concepts of health. So how is it that you came to this work, and what is it that you call it?
So I will say as well, if people are interested, I do have some brief descriptions of the images, and they're on my website, and it's pretty easy. It's redbioethics.ca. And there will be more. It's actually a chapter in my thesis, so I will be updating that. But there are some basic, I shouldn't say basic, but some rushed descriptions. But about the work was commissioned by Maori curator Naharaka Mason, and they were originally in a show called A Very Different World. And the images were created in a way for me to cope working on the COVID-19 triage table. I was on the table with 17 other ethicists. I was the only Indigenous bioethicist on there. I'm one of 3 Indigenous bioethicists in Canada. And I'm not saying that because, oh, I'm so great. I'm saying that because we're swamped with work and it's really hard, right? Mm-hmm. I wrote this out in my journal today because I have a hard time talking about what I do and why I stayed in a situation that was so bad, where the way things unfolded. So a bioethicist is somebody that helps the clinicians or agencies such as the government or hospitals basically find a threshold for what is permissible or what is ethical. We also deal with systems of equity. And of course, in terms of equity in healthcare, that equity doesn't exist for Indigenous populations, for Black populations, for immigrant populations, people of color. So that's very, very stressful. And what we do, I guess, from the outset, like if you look at something on TV, the relationship between the ethicist and the clinician or the doctor, it seems like a perfect marriage, right? Because we're coming together and we're making these very difficult decisions. And I want to emphatically state that I am by no means saying that ethicists are heroes. They're not. We're literally we develop policies so clinicians can interact with those policies for 5 minutes out of their day. And so basically what I was doing on the bioethics table, we were anticipating Italy happening, right? With no resources, right? And so we were trying to develop a protocol around who would get what when we ran out of everything. And so the moral injury for doctors was so high because they constantly had to make decisions that would go against their moral compass. And so we come in and we just give them a break so they can humanize the process, or in some situations disconnect from their humanity, and give them a short break so they can go out there and they can maintain the rigors of medicine and tolerate the intolerable. Because it's really, really difficult in a situation when you're going to work and you're responsible for 12 or 18 patients and 6 or 7 of those patients are dying every day. Then you're in a situation in a pandemic where 6 or 8 of your patients are dying every day. But those patients don't have the support of their family. They're not in the room with them. Literally, there are people that worked in ICUs, and this was not covered in the press. Their only job was to go around and hold an iPad while their families watch their loved ones die. And so this is what we did as ethicists. We tried to develop protocols to make the decisions, to take the weight off the clinicians who had to figure out what they were doing with resources. And it got to the point where we had a very rudimentary understanding of what equity was. And at the end of the day, Indigenous people, we have a shorter lifespan. We are less healthy because we don't have access to the social determinants of health. So thank God, like if there was one thing that me and the other Indigenous women that were working in community got, was that we got Indigenous people first in line to get vaccinations. I failed in every aspect of that work. I failed miserably. But if there was one thing that we got, it was to get the vaccination into Indigenous communities. And that's what bioethics is literally going to work and being stuck in a shit situation and making the least worst decision. And all we're looking for is to find a place where people can die a private and dignified death, and we fucked it. There was just nothing we could do in a situation. We were not prepared for COVID. And so this is where these images came from. I was in agony. I'm still recovering from this. I am in counseling because of this job. It was the worst job I ever had. It wasn't worth the experience. There was nothing. And so that's where those images came. Sorry, that was a really long rant. Like it was a Steinbeck explanation, but that's where the art came from. Got to Hemingway it up a little, you know?
I just want to acknowledge the deep and amazing work that you have done in explaining that to us in this format, which is very public. And I'm really honored to be in this Zoom conversation with you right now and that I could hear this. I think that we go about our day every day just not knowing how these policies affect us. And then when something like a pandemic comes, this thing comes up to the head very quickly about the inequities. And when I did see the vaccines coming out for Indigenous people first, it was, I sort of felt seen in a way that I felt like maybe was not seen before. So your apologies are not necessary. We should be thanking you. We should be thanking you for every day. So I just want to acknowledge that.
It's not necessary, and thank you for saying that, because as I said, I failed, but we got something. So, and I'll keep working.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take this up, but failure is sometimes a good thing though, right? Like failure comes new things, or it's like a
Yes.
bushfire that comes through, right?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. It's important to be humble. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I just want to point out, though, that just to address that we have this table of medicines in the gallery, and this is pimâtisiwin's way of trying to come into a relationship with our bodies. It's really a way to understand how we can be a part of the system as well. Becca was talking with us about how Becca Taylor, who was helping create this exhibition with artists, was discussing about how there are so many things that as an institution or other arts and cultural practices are formed by these policies that we can sort of shift into shape a little bit, but not really largely, which is sort of what you're talking about, able to really transform. And so it's asking the question, what space can we occupy within the means that we have? And so if we're doing something like offering medicines in a space, we have the intention and ability to provide care in that space, that it is a safe enough space to do that. And so it's these small steps to make bigger motions is sort of how we're trying to bring that to. And I think it kind of brushes up against a little bit of what you're talking about as well. So, well, and I know that there's a whole group of people behind you as well, or in front of you as well. So I want to thank them all for coming today too, to be a part of that conversation. And so thank you everybody for being here. Yes. And so Carrie's work is right to the left of them, camera left, I suppose we could say. And Carrie, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to this work and talking about it with Becca and how you believe it's the right work to be in this exhibition? I mean, maybe you can't answer that specifically, but what is it that you feel is important to convey about it?
Um, I mean, for me, this work was really a journey. It was like one of my first, well, I guess like my second major project that was really focusing on trying to connect the land through beadwork. I'd always had, I've moved around a lot in my life, and I've never lived on like my ancestors and relatives' land. I've only visited. And so this was, I've developed projects through my practice to kind of develop more of a relationship with the land through beadwork. And um, I've always loved and admired and have had daily relationships with plants in the sense that like I just love, I go to the same places every day. Like I go to the same dog park, for instance, in Mi'kma'ki with my dog every day. And I notice things. And I think that that is how my ancestors grew to know and to develop relationships with the land is to really just be with it and to notice it. And so this project was really taking that concept but putting into beadwork and like being able to visit the land and the plants where my ancestors are from and take that kind of home with me and be able to spend time through this very like beading is a very laborious practice. It's the same gesture over and over and over again. And I was using very small beads in order to get like intricate details. And so that practice was really just like one, being able to like honor the plant and the medicine that it has given my ancestors. Like these medicines healed us. They helped us, they fed us, they like there's lots of different ways that uh, that they have helped throughout this like throughout my life, but also my ancestors' life. And then beading for me is medicine as well. It's this practice and this gesture and this time that I really get to spend with myself, but also with my ancestors and with my community. Um, and it's a way for me to honor these plants. And so it's a different type of medicine. It's yeah, and so I guess I don't know why Becca chose it. I can't really speak for that, but um, I think that there are lots of different ways that we can help ourselves be feel full in our spirit or in our life, and beating and walking and witnessing are things that help me. Yeah.
I mean, I know why Becca chose it actually because we feel that plants need to be a part of this exhibition. It's around medicines, it's around knowledge, it's around land-based access, and your work really shows that in a way that's easy to abstract and learn about in a new way that people are not always seeing immediately. So I think it's powerful work in itself. But how did you decide, like, what is the rigor that you have around working in circle, and how do you create body sovereignty to this practice? It's a bit of an abstract question.
I think that, I mean, the circle is a very powerful image of this. Like I always think about cyclical time and how like our now references the past and the present and how we should consider that we are linked together through time and space and that really is symbolic in like a circular format or circular base, and the first sketch that I did, or the first beadwork that I did, was the juniper, and I didn't do it in a consecutive circle. I did it like I beaded the juniper first, and then I filled in. And it was when I was filling in that I realized that they all needed to be circular, and that they all needed to be this sort of consensus or consecutive, like building out of something. And for me, that was really, it's an educational experience, because it was like I'm still very much like I'm still learning how to bead. I'm still learning how to, like anytime you make something, or I like think about like, oh, okay, maybe next time I would do this differently, or maybe next time I would try that, or, just like shifting or moving in with the material, because you learn about it a little bit more each time you partake in it. And so that for me is learning in a certain sort of body sovereignty sort of way, in terms of like moving with something else, knowing something and shifting with it. Sort of like swimming or something. I don't know. There's this sort of way that you move when you learn. And I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you're making total sense. I mean, it just makes me really think about watching my mother bead, in that sort of relationship with movement with the material and learning each time and new ideas. It's like you're always learning with beading, it seems like. So I thought that was a really beautiful description of body sovereignty, actually. Thank you. I did hear from Chloe from pimâtisiwin, she from our programs coordinator, who's amazing, by the way, so I hope you'll have a chance to connect with Chloe. They had talked about Corvus unfortunately not being available for this session, so I just want to acknowledge their work. And Becca's also texting me from the background too, so I want to mention that because she probably is laughing about how I said I know why she chose your work, Carrie, but she's talking about how medicinal plant knowledge is part of Indigenous health sovereignty specifically. So it's nice just to be very specific and pointed about that. So thank you, Becca, for filling that in. And going back to Corvus's work, sorry, I keep going back and forth, but Corvus created this new work just that we showed a little bit earlier in this session. And that conversation really was between Becca and Corvus developing a conversation around harm reduction and health sovereignty. So I think that that really bridges between what you're talking about, Carrie, and really what Lisa is working on as well. And Lisa, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about your work there specifically, but also how it could maybe relate to harm reduction and health sovereignty as well, because I think you would have a different take on that than maybe Corvus would.
Sure. So I guess in any situation that I go in, I guess because I'm an ethicist, it's related to harm reduction, or trying to reduce harm. And as I said earlier, sometimes it's making the least worst decision, or it's around equity. And I find if people understand colonialism, they are able to I guess lessen harm or reduce harm. But I feel like in a way, like harm reduction is it's just doing, like I said, the best with what we have. So if I was going to be specific about the work in terms of harm reduction, when I was talking about equity and we were literally anticipating running out of ventilators. So we were trying to develop a scale at what time, if we, God forbid, right, if we ran out of ventilators, how would we refuse a ventilator? And so what we were doing was we were going through a medical model, which is called a frailty score. So for us who are able-bodied, our frailty score would be 1 or 2. But if somebody was infirmed or had issues with their lungs, they would be, for instance, my mother would be rated as a frailty score of 5, right? So we kept kind of going down this line of what is a frailty score and how do we measure frailty and make it permissible to deny somebody a ventilator. But in terms of harm reduction, when we look at Indigenous people, their frailty score is simply going to be higher because healthcare is not equitable. So when your housing complex or you don't have access to clean water, or you are working 4 jobs, and you're exhausted, you're not going to have the immunity. You're not going to have time to exercise, right? People don't realize what a privilege it is to be able to go and exercise in the gym. So in terms of harm reduction, I was there trying to explain that a frailty score is a very, very rudimentary scale to measure wellness. So that's what this work had to deal with specifically. But I'm always trying to kind of, I guess, reduce harm. But at the same time, often Indigenous patients are painted as a clinical problem to be resolved. So when they're coming into the clinic, it's like they're already being perceived as being harmed, or even the word resiliency can be really dangerous, right? Like because why do they need to be resilient? How can we be expected to be resilient, right? When we don't have access to the basic human rights. And I don't think people don't realize that there are 94 communities in this country that don't have access to clean water. Well, if you look in political science literature, removing somebody from water is actually considered an act of war. So, I love the idea of harm reduction in my work, but I think as an ethicist, working with other bioethicists or other physicians, other clinicians, they don't really understand what harm reduction is. I hope I answered that question.
You answered it wonderfully. It reminded me of why I don't tell my therapist when I have a new relationship, I don't tell them I'm Indigenous right away because I'm white passing, so they often don't link it. So I usually wait until 5 or 6 sessions because I see them always writing furiously trying to solve the problem of what are the things I'm talking about with my family and the connections. And then as soon as I mention that I'm Indigenous, they stop writing immediately. It's very noticeable. And it just really made me think about how you're talking about resiliency and harm and why it's a problem to solve. It really made me think a lot about that. So that was really wonderful framing. Thank you for bringing that.
Well, if I could be blunt, because everybody here knows me, so I can be blunt about it. I remember going to a doctor and some doctor thinking that he was woke and, harm reduction, da. And so I am a woman who is slightly overweight, and I'm Native, and I have substance abuse in my past. And he thought it was appropriate, and this is the first time that I met him, because I'm an Indigenous woman, I'm overweight, I have passed with substances, to ask if I had been sexually abused. And he thought that that was appropriate. And I just got mad. I was like, of course I have. What, you idiot. Why would you ask me that? And I know that these things like sexual abuse are talking about sexual abuse in public spaces is taboo. But you know what? I'm going to say, as somebody who is a clinician, somebody who's an ethicist, somebody who works in medicine, as a Native woman, or as all women, as all people who have been abused, it's not our shame. And we don't have to hide it. But that being said, it's not our shame. We don't have to hide it. We need to have the respect and the space to reveal those travesties on our own time. And so for somebody to be a clinician and assume that they're being woke, asking if I'm fat because I've been sexually abused, right? That's harm reduction gone the wrong way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
yeah.
I don't know. So I'm really on my high horse, just push me
No,
off if I'm on that pedestal.
no, you're just talking about a lot of people who are Indigenous' experience in a private setting. And
Yeah.
you're just, it makes me think about family connections and how people are always constantly trying to break apart families because of these dedicated items, or when you have these challenges with your family, whether you're related to them or not, or adopted or not, and then people have the simple solution of how to solve it when it's a lot more complex because of this deep-seated discussion around uh, through medical care, through healthcare, but also through addictions, because it is just so tricky, that navigation. So I think that's why like Carrie's work underseating all of that, I think really helps bring that sort of strong balance, that land, bringing it into the space as you sort of tear apart these larger conversations.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about how you pour that into the work, because you talk a lot about the conditions of which you work, but how is it that you pour it into the work that you do personally? How do you arrive at these compositions?
So there's two things. One is to heal myself. So, I was talking to my mother yesterday, right? Having an intimate conversation and talking about how, as a person who was taken away from the land of my ancestors, that I couldn't be sober and I couldn't really be alive until I knew that I was part of a caribou, right? Until I knew wolf medicine, until I knew how to be humble like a wolf, how I knew how to listen carefully to my elders, how I knew that there would be times that would be painful when I would have to offer my body for sustenance, my bones for tools, my fingernails for ceremony. And so I recognize that situation of how I am from generations of matriarchs, and that my life is not my own, right? That we decide what we're going to do before we even get here, right? So I use the animals to soothe myself, to heal myself, to connect with my ancestors. And then I also use the animals to teach clinicians about creating meaningful relationships with their patients. So wolf and hawk are two animals that I use a lot. One, wolf teaches us about tenacity and failure. So when we look at National Geographic and we see a wolf documentary, we see wolf thriving and being this fierce hunter. But what we don't see is that wolf fails all the time. And he has to really learn how to navigate his territory in order to be successful, right? And he also is successful because he's humble and he navigates his relationship in a community with humility. And wolves have a lot of squabbles, right? They get into it with each other, but they're humble and they communicate carefully. So how does that translate to a clinician, like to a doctor going into an Indigenous community? He has to be, she has to, they have to be humble. They have to listen. They have to be aware that they are going to fail over and over and over again before they learn to navigate that terrain with their family, right? Which is the pack. Especially when clinicians go into community. They're going to fail and they have to listen, right? That's really, really important. If we're going to hawk medicine, what does hawk remind us of when hawk shows up? So hawk shows up and she circles around the sky, right? And so I'm a person who feels sorry for myself at times, right? So hawk will show up and she'll be like, well, she's circling the sky. Hawk can see everything. And she's like, hey, Lisa, why don't you take a wider view, right? And why don't you recognize all the gifts that you have received, and then keep circling around the sky and open yourself up for more gifts. So how do we extend that to clinical medicine with doctors? Doctors have to recognize that they're in a situation of privilege, that there's going to be really, really hard times, and that they have to open their eyes and they have to circle around and they have to open themselves up for new gifts that they're going to receive through the gift of practicing medicine with patients. But another thing that they have to learn as clinicians is that with Indigenous patients, with all patients, medicine takes place out of the four walls of the clinic. So they have to constantly be thinking about how am I going to restore wellness, or how am I going to enable my patient to pass away in a good way? How am I going to offer them palliative care? You got to be aware. You got to be out of the four walls of the clinic. And that's where we become really arrogant, right, as ethicists, as physicians. We think that our practice only exists in the four walls of the clinic or the hospital, and it's not. So we have to be aware, we have to not feel sorry for ourselves. We have to be aware of the gifts that we have to receive or that we're receiving, and we have to open ourselves up to new gifts. And we always have to look everywhere all the time to do a good job. So that's how I use the art, the animals.
I'm really impressed with how succinct you can kind of bring it out wide open into practice, and then how you bring it into your own work, and then you bring it back out open again to other people. That's a really complex layer of systems that you're enacting. So thank you for being so kind and describing and illustrating it for us so that we all have a way to like hang on to the words that you're saying. Yeah, it's quite beautiful. But it kind of, you had said something early on that reminded me of what Carrie's practice is about too. I want to ask Carrie one more final question, and then we'll see if anyone in the audience has any questions before we close the session up. And you've talked about in how your work is challenging the status quo, the colonial status quo, Carrie. And I don't know if it really intersects with what Lisa is saying, but for some reason it feels like it might. I'm curious if you can expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I relate to that question in like lots of different ways. And I guess in like a simple way, like I used to work for pharmacy for like 10 years. And I worked as like a pharmacy technician, and the way that medicine is really kind of orchestrated there is very different than the way that I think myself as what medicine is, and the way that medicine can be, the way that medicine comes into my life. And so, like the series that like the first family that I did here was kind of taking this idea of medicine and really focusing on like relationships in medicine and developing relationships in medicine, and then also how medicines can be relationship, but then how they can also be practice, and how they can be gesture, and how that can heal you in different ways, I think. And yeah, challenging the status quo. I mean, I think that all Indigenous artists kind of do this in many, many different ways, and we've always done it because the way that colonization has like kind of like infiltrated our lives and our land and our families and our everything. Like the world is not made for us, and so the way that you like working in certain mediums or working in certain spaces, you're constantly kind of doing that in trying to do it in like a good way, or trying to do it in like a way that makes sense to you or feels good, because like a lot of these spaces don't feel good to be in. A lot of them feel draining, like the medical system, for instance. Like what Lisa is talking about is like a very, very draining space to be in, and it doesn't really work with our worldview, or it doesn't really work with what we think is right or comfortable, I guess. Like, yeah, like my grandmother never went to the doctor. Like she would never go to the doctor, and then she fell ill one day, and then like she ended up going into a coma and passing out, or like passing away. And like that is because of the medical system. That is because of like this certain type of medicine that that is so harmful and can be so difficult to navigate. And that is like a Western sort of view of medicine. And I think that like that view is not our own. Like that view is not what I think that we heal ourselves with. Like we have lots of different forms of medicine, I think, that we practice and we share with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very succinct description, especially how it bridges the gap between what Lisa is saying. And I know that we don't have Corvus with us, but I'm really curious how they would add to that conversation too, from the indigiqueer experience. I think that could also be a really lovely layer to bring into there as well. But I really loved how you said this world is not made for us. I thought that also really sort of bracketed what Lisa was saying as well in terms of resiliency and how to solve the problem and things like that. I think that that's quite wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to open it up to the audience. It's so lovely that you're there today, so thank you for your time. I'm curious if anyone in the audience has a question, and if we don't hear it, perhaps Emily or Lisa can just say it a little bit louder so we can hear it.
Does anybody have a question? Jamie, do you have one? Sorry, not to put you on the spot. Thank you. Thank you. Well, my co-panelist had a lot of wonderful things to say as well, and I think it was hard to hear. But do you have a website that I can share with everybody? I am keynoting a conference tomorrow, and then I'm also doing hospital rounds. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can share your work with the residents and the physicians. So maybe if you could send it to Chloe, and then would it be okay if I shared your work in my talk tomorrow?
Yeah. I just typed it into the chat, so it's there
Okay.
too. And then yeah, I would that's very flattering. Thank you.
Oh no, I love what you had to say with plant medicine. And I think there's such a disconnection with plant medicine because people don't realize things like penicillin and other things actually come from plants. You know, like we figured it out. Like the ibuprofen that we covet so much as a pain regulator has been used in our sweat lodges in the branches, right, for so long.
I actually didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, we figured that out. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would love to share your work if that's okay.
Yeah, very flattered. Thank you, and honored.
Well, I do want this conversation to go on forward, but I want to be conscious of time and really appreciate everyone sitting for this time and visiting us online as well. So, because Chloe, our programs coordinator, was able to make this live for us as well. And I also want to appreciate, we'll send out our appreciation for everyone coming together on this mixed venue. It's tricky doing Zoom in person and on, all of that. So thank you again for your patience with that. And I really also want to thank the artists for being involved. Carrie and Lisa, thank you for being here with us today. And Corvus, of course. We're really excited about this conversation and also the work that you bring to our gallery. So thank you for being a part of this space and being with us. So hi, and thank you everybody today. Enjoy the afternoon.
Merci, Cho.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Come on.